D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick 1025, 1063 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. I hope you and yours had a wonderful holiday yesterday. For my fellow Jews out there, happy second night of Hanukkah. Our holiday is far from over, but we are here with you for the next 2 hours. We've got bowl games starting at 1 o'clock, taking you all the way through the evening. So we will be on 2 hours today and tomorrow. Elliot Freeman of Sportsnet will join us at noon instead of his usual 1 o'clock, but we will talk the NHL and Nashville Predators with Elliot Freeman coming up at noon. We will get into the Predators today, winners of 4 of their past 6. They return to action tomorrow at St. Louis to start, I believe, a 6-game road trip, a big 6-game road trip coming up. But gentlemen, how are you? How was your holiday yesterday?
Hey, I'm doing wonderful. Holiday was good, relaxing. Got a chance to, watch some football. I feel for those that, and maybe everybody, I assume everybody has Netflix, but maybe everybody doesn't. It seems like everybody's went away from cable and went to one of these streaming platforms. But the football game was on Netflix. I wonder how many of their how much of the viewership did they just automatically slice in half by throwing it on Netflix. I'm sure Netflix paid a handsome amount for those 2 games because there were 2 good games. Well, really 1 good game. That second game was just a complete blowout.
Houston, it's just what's going on?
CJ Stroud doesn't look, and maybe it is the offensive line, and he's shell-shocked now, but he didn't look like the quarterback that we have seen all of last year and some of this year.
I thought about that. 2 years ago, it was the Titans that completely collapsed at the end of the season. Last year, it was the Jaguars that completely collapsed. The Texans can't three-peat because they already have the division locked up, but they're not playing well right now. That's a team that, if I'm a wild card, I'm like, how do we play the Texans in the first round? That's a team we can go and beat on their field because they're not looking good.
Were you as shocked as I was that 31-2 was not a scoregami? Are you familiar with the concept of scoregami?
I'm familiar with it. So repeat for people that don't know exactly. It's like a score that's never happened or something,
or rarely happens.
Correct.
Yeah.
No, it's it's a score. It's a score that's never happened. So according to the actual scoregami Twitter account, I believe 31-2 has happened 2 other times in NFL history. But when I saw 31-2, I said, that has to be a scoregami. 31-2, but it has indeed happened, I believe, twice before.
Are you just talking about the actual them having 31 and
the final score?
The final
Any
score,
31-2 ever. Like I wonder what other ones are out there, but you'd think that would be a rare score. So it is rare, but it has happened. Wow. Scoregami has to be never happened, right? The final score has never been X.
I remember I can never see it being that, like a score that's. In what profession can it actually happen outside of football? Like professional games.
Yeah, I would say that football's got a better shot at scoregamis. Wouldn't you say, Adam, than lower scoring games, right? Because the games are more common.
But the previous time it happened was September 19th, 1965. The Cowboys defeated the Giants 31-2.
See, these are the things you find out by listening on December 26th to our show.
You learn on this show.
That sounds like a monster that comes from underneath the earth. Origami.
It's all from Monsters, Inc.
Exactly.
With Vanderbilt playing in a bowl game, some Vanderbilt fans, there's going to be at least one random Vanderbilt fan. If you're out there and you're a Vanderbilt fan, you remember this game, or maybe you're driving down to Birmingham right now. Who knows? I want you to text the text line and say you remember this game. But the mighty Vanderbilt Commodores played against the Lou. He was with, I think, CBS or something like that. He came back. He was a little bit older, but he had good success for South Carolina. But they were awful that year. So somebody had to win. These were not two good teams. This was at South Carolina. Vanderbilt, I think, won the game 11-8. I think was the score. I don't know if that's the scoregami at the time. This was in the mid-90s, late 90s. They won 11-8, and here was the stat of the game. Neither team converted a third down.
Wow.
Neither team.
That has to be an origami.
If that's not a scoregami, I don't know what will.
Oh my goodness, a scoregami.
Now, there's a monster that will come into your nightmares right there. No third down,
Especially if you're
conversions.
South Carolina fan.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, at least
No
Vanderbilt won the
third
game.
down.
Vanderbilt won.
So that game must have went pretty quick.
Yeah. I was just thinking, hey, Vanderbilt won. I'm good. But whatever the stats tell me, that's okay. W. We don't get too many of those. But the
Either
Doors are
way,
back to the bowl
31
game tomorrow. So I want at
Yes,
least
they
one. There's
are.
one Vanderbilt fan at least remember this. Call us or text us 615-737-1025. I think it was a Greg Zolman, Woody Woodenhofer, one of the many comical Woody Woodenhofer Saturdays in team history.
It was a record-setting day for the Ravens in their 31-2 win against the Texans. You had Derrick Henry setting the Ravens single season record with his 16th total touchdown, surpassing Ray Rice in 2011 and Mark Ingram in 2019. And Lamar Jackson is the all-time leading rusher by a quarterback in NFL history, surpassing Michael Vick. I know that makes David James quite happy, but the Baltimore Ravens ran all over the Houston Texans, and the Ravens have been coming on strong. I think that's 3 wins for them in like 11 days. They beat the Giants, they beat the Steelers, and now they've beaten the Texans. So the Ravens, look out, 11-5. They're coming on strong.
But it's how they beat them. They got back to the brand of football. And this is why, and we talked about this early on about the impact Derrick Henry would have on the Baltimore Ravens. And the conversation was, listen, Derrick's not really for the regular season. That's not why they got Derrick Henry. They got Derrick Henry for the playoffs, so they could play the brand of football, slow the game down, keep the ball out of Josh Allen's hands, or more importantly, out of Patrick Mahomes' hand. And now you're starting to see them sort of flick that switch to playoff mode. They're running the football more. They're relying heavy on their offensive line and Derrick Henry, because this is when you need Derrick Henry headed into the playoffs, so you can wear down those teams that have these, these elite quarterbacks. And we're talking about Buffalo, and Kansas City.
Just to follow up on what you asked, Derek, I'm looking at this on themirror.com. They said, according to Netflix, they eclipsed their peak concurrent viewers of any Christmas day in the last 4 years. 1/3 of the global concurrence, I guess that's the viewerships they have around the world, were tuned into the Chiefs-Steelers game. So I think sounds like they're very happy with how it went. I guess the stream, there weren't any issues with the stream
there was no
to
issues,
speak of.
Not this,
like
there
there were with
with
the Mike Tyson
Yeah,
debacle
it's
thing where
huge,
that was
yeah.
the story. And they had basically network announcers, right? They weren't breaking in new people. It looked like it was a solid production, right? There wasn't any issue with that. So far, so good, I guess.
There you go. They're gonna continue to
And
do
you
it.
had Beyonce.
I love that I love the halftime. Oh man, that was the first time. Honestly, that's the first time I've watched a halftime show or a Super Bowl halftime show. I hadn't watched Super Bowl halftime show in years, gosh, but I had never stayed and watched a regular season halftime show, and it was worth it, completely worth it. So
We do have some breaking NHL news to pass along.
Ooh.
The Detroit Red Wings have fired coach Derek Lalonde and replaced him with Todd McClellan. So the Detroit Red Wings have made a coaching change. Derek Lalonde and associate coach Bob Bugner out, Todd McClellan in for the Detroit Red Wings. So another coaching change in the NHL today. Merry Christmas, Derek Lalonde. Here are your walking papers.
man,
Bob
you
Bugner,
fired somebody after Christmas?
Bob Bugner, the boogeyman, one of the original Nashville Predators, teammate of Andrew Burnett's. Now, that is that market. Wow. Those fans, They're starved. Derek Lalonde was the up-and-coming star coach that they got, right? The Tampa, Steve
Plucked off of the
Yzerman.
Tampa Bay Lightning
Right.
bench.
He
Yep.
was supposed to be the guy. Wow. Looking back.
So how many coaching changes is that now, Willie? 4, 5 in the NHL this
D-Mace,
season?
I used to think, and Adam, you can probably remember some of these days. When I used to follow the NBA a lot more than I do now, like I just can't focus in every night. I used to get the sporting news and look at all the box scores and the stats for every team. I could tell you all the players, but it's getting harder for me. But I used to think the NBA was the ultimate musical chairs. Like I remember when I was growing up, there was a series of coaches that always were ending up on a team somewhere. But I think the NHL has eclipsed the NBA of those days. Like, remember, the ultimate is Lenny Wilkens, the all-time winningest coach, right? He was a player coach for a while. He racked up a lot of wins. He was a player coach. He's got more wins
anywhere.
But he coached a lot of places, right? A lot of different places. Then there was like obscure names like Gene Shue and Kevin Lockery and Stan Albeck. These guys would all rotate around to different teams. But now Todd McClellan, how many teams is this, Adam, for Todd? This is at least 5,
with the
right?
Sharks, the Oilers, the Kings.
There's another one in there.
Is this 4?
I feel like there's another one in there.
If it's not, it's
I'll
going
have
to be
to look
another.
We'll have to look it up. But he's racking them up. Peter Laviolette, we know, is famous. He's got, 6 or 7 now. This
is his 4th coaching stop. 7 years in San Jose, 5 years with the Kings, and 4 years with the Oilers. So this is McClellan's 4th head coaching position.
And he's not that old. I don't think McClellan. Is he?
It's
not like he's 70. It's not like he's 70 years old.
In his 60s.
McClellan is 57.
It's only 57.
Oh, wow.
It's 4 stops. Wow.
Either he's doing something really good or really bad, or both.
Well, he's had plenty of success, namely with the Sharks. He was the coach of the Sharks when they were one of the top teams every regular season in the NHL. But I believe that is now 4 head coaching changes in the NHL, and it's just the day after Christmas. But the Red Wings make a coaching change. Out goes Derek Lalonde. In comes Todd McClellan. But the other game in the NFL yesterday, the Kansas City Chiefs lock up the number 1 overall seed in the AFC. They improved to 15-1 by beating the Steelers 29-10. The Steelers, by the way, are slipping here as the Ravens are picking up steam. But I certainly feel as if though this 15-1 Chiefs team, it certainly feels like the least imposing 15-1 team I can remember. And the reason for that is, although last night's game was not a 1-possession game, the Chiefs have 11 1-possession wins this season, which is tied for the most in a season in NFL history. So they have the quarterback, they have the players that can win those coin toss games. But I look at this 15-1, Derek and Willie, and I don't see a dominant 15-1. I still see a good team, a team that has shown its championship medal by winning these 1-possession games. But I don't see a juggernaut the way I've seen other 15-1 teams in the past.
And I understand what you're saying, because listen, I was playing the era when Tom Brady went 16-0, and they had a lot of close games, but they were able to pull them out. Why? Not just because of Tom Brady, but because of their defense. When Tom wasn't on, their defense was on, and that's what you see from Kansas City right now. And that's what makes them so dangerous. People don't understand that. People just they're looking at, okay, Patrick Mahomes isn't having the Patrick Mahomes type year. You don't have 1,000-yard, pass catchers. Travis Kelce isn't having a season that he has had, prior to this one. So you see people look at all of that and they say this Kansas City Chiefs team can't. They're not as good as the previous teams that won Super Bowls. When in actuality, yeah, they are. They're better. Why? Because of their defense. Everybody knows that if Patrick Mahomes has the ball last, he's going to win. That's all they want. It's Patrick Mahomes to have the ball down by less than 7 points, or if they're down 7 points. They know we just give it to Patrick. He's going to win us the game or tie it. Their big thing is their defense. And each and every game this year, their defense has stepped up outside of the Buffalo game, where Buffalo just went up and down the field on them. But each game that they've played, their defense or their special teams has been the reason they really won. But Patrick has done Patrick things when he needed to do them. That's why I look at this and say, listen, I love the Baltimore Ravens. Titans ain't getting in it, so I don't, I can't root for them. But outside of that, Kansas City has to be the favorite by all margin. Why? Because their defense is carrying them. And Patrick is going to be Patrick when he needs to be Patrick.
I think about this a lot too, and you guys hit on the two big points. I agree with you 100%, D-Mace. Their defense is just as important, I think, as their offense. But to your point, Adam, as I look at the analytics that rate teams, if you take the record away, right? This is the one thing that people always say. When you win a lot of close games, we used to say about Mike Vrabel's Titans, you are on the tightrope a little bit. You have an easier way of stumbling if you're not dominating. The Ravens have the most dominating stats collectively of any team. And even the Bills are more dominating statistically than the Chiefs. But who do you like in a close game playing at Arrowhead Stadium? You like the Chiefs, right? I think it's just going to – we're setting up for the next chapter in one of those razor's edge. And I think if you're the Ravens, right, they're not going to get a bye. So they might have to beat – I don't know how the draw is going to set up. They might have to beat Buffalo at Buffalo. And then the Chiefs, at Arrowhead. But are they good enough to do it? I think they are, right? Talent wise, that's going to be tough to stop. Derrick Henry in the cold weather.
They're just
and
like
Lamar Jackson
they're
doing
just
his
like
thing.
the Chiefs.
Yeah,
they're like the Chiefs from this standpoint. Their defense is starting to play a lot better now. Their defense is struggling, mainly their pass defense. Their pass defense has picked it up, and they're playing extremely well right now. It goes back to Peyton Manning, and I can only say Peyton Manning and Tom because Drew Brees wasn't in the AFC. But Peyton Manning and Tom, it wasn't who's better. It's who has the ball last. And in this scenario, when you have Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, it's not about who's better. It's about who has the ball last. Yeah. So that's why I look at Kansas City and say, because of the way their defense has been playing all year, not just toward the end, and Baltimore's defense has started to play a lot better toward the end, but their defense has played really, really pretty good the whole season, meaning Kansas City Chiefs. If you go into a contest with either Buffalo or Baltimore, whoever has the ball last win. If it's a one-score game, whoever has the ball last win. That's why I said they went and got Derrick Henry, so Patrick Mahomes doesn't get a chance to get the ball at the end, or Josh Allen doesn't get a chance to get the ball in the end.
Another thing, just skimming the numbers, Adam, just looking at the point of how it sets up, because I think it's going to be some great playoff football. The special teams, we've talked a lot about special teams for the Titans, dead last. Baltimore is 24th in overall special teams play, Buffalo 28th, KC is 10th. So that's another way you win close games is you win on the margins with special teams. Baltimore, sometimes you watch them, and I think Buffalo can get to this level too. You're like, how in the world have they lost? Now, Buffalo's 12-3, but how have the Ravens lost 5 games? Like with the team they have, they shouldn't have lost 5. They've lost a lot of really close games, but Tucker hasn't had a great year, right? He has, very uncharacteristic. He's missed a lot of kicks. That's been one thing.
I think 2 or 3 out of the 5, they were leading at halftime.
Oh, yeah. They've been right in it. Yeah. There was the one, the first game of the year against Kansas City where they easily could have won. The toe.
Yeah,
the toe.
It's all about the toe.
I'm so better about
just all about the toe.
That much. Just that much. It's just
the toe, man. The toe.
They lost wearing white cleats.
They lost to the Raiders.
Yeah, lost to the Raiders.
They lost to the Raiders. That's hard to do, but they did.
Man, that's like losing. No, I ain't gonna say that.
Losing to the Raiders is indeed hard to do. 615-737-1025. You can call us and text us. Our phone lines are driven by Wilson County Hyundai.com. Coming up next, if the Titans coaching job were to become available, how desirable is it? We'll discuss what one NFL analyst says about the potential of the Titans head coaching opening, and we'll get into how desirable or undesirable that position would be coming up next. But before we do, the Game Nashville Sports Network is your home for college football bowl games and the college football playoff presented by Twin Peaks and Parman Tractor and Equipment. Today, 1025 The Game will have a triple header starting right after our program at 1 o'clock with the Game Above Sports Bowl as Pittsburgh takes on Toledo, followed by the Rate Bowl, Rutgers versus Kansas State, and then the 68 Ventures Bowl with Arkansas State and Bowling Green. As David James will tell you, Arkansas is a state, and it does have a football team. For a list of all of the college football games carried on the Game Nashville Sports Network, visit thegamenashville.com/bowl games.
All right, let's talk Lee Company. The next chapter for the Predators will be tomorrow evening in St. Louis as the Predators go on a long road trip, and we'll have all of the coverage throughout this. Can the Predators inch their way back into relevancy? Well, we'll see. There's some good signs before Christmas, but can they pick it up and find the mojo on the road? Meanwhile, back at home, Lee Company always has you covered in your home. They're a proud sponsor of our Predator coverage. You'll see their display all around Bridgestone Arena as well. They've been in business since 1944, so they're going on 81 years of service. That's pretty incredible if you think about it. And the reason is they've got a really good system that works. They keep your heating units going, your cooling, your plumbing, and electric. And their best method of doing that is the preventative maintenance approach of the home maintenance plan. Annual checkups, you pay a small monthly fee. They'll find those little problems before they become big problems. And when you need repairs, you'll get discounts on those repairs. Just keep this phone number and website ready to go. LeeCompany.com and 615-567-1000. LeeCompany.com, 615-567-1000 is the phone number. Lee Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators.
This ain't Texas.
Tune into 102.5, 106.3 The Game tomorrow for Vanderbilt football presented by Prince's Hot Chicken. The Commodores will take on Georgia Tech in the Birmingham Bowl, with pregame beginning at 1 o'clock and kickoff at 2:30. Coverage is also available on the 102.5 The Game app and at thegamenashville.com. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Tennessee Titans return to action on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Exciting times. 3-12 versus 3-12. I will be
Who wants
warming
to win?
up tankathon.com
Who is worse?
throughout this game.
Yes.
This game will have major implications at tankathon.com. The 3-12 Titans and the 3-12 Jaguars. By the way, it was announced during, I believe it was yesterday, that Mason Rudolph will indeed start again at quarterback for the Tennessee Titans on Sunday against the Jacksonville Jaguars. So despite some struggles from Mason Rudolph last week, he will be back under center for the Titans against the Jaguars on Sunday. So this morning I saw an article from Bill Barnwell at ESPN.com. The headline, "How desirable are these potential job openings?" And he acknowledges in the story that not every team he includes might have a job opening. But with the Titans 3-12, people will certainly discuss the job security of Brian Callahan. So these were the 9 teams that Barnwell included on his list, and he ranked them from least desirable to most desirable. And this is not the order, but these are the 9 teams he included: the Bears, the Dolphins, the Giants, the Jaguars, the Jets, the Patriots, the Raiders, the Saints, and the Titans. So according to Bill Barnwell, the Tennessee Titans are number 6 on this list. So there are 3 teams that the Titans are that the Titans have, I guess, are more desirable than the Raiders at 7, the Jets at 8, and the Saints at 9. So before we get into what Barnwell had to say, Derek and Willie, if you are coming up with the pros and cons of this potential job opening, and I think we would all agree that I don't want to say that the likelihood of Brian Callahan losing his job is slim, but it would seem like I mean, personally, I think it would be rather foolish to fire Brian Callahan after one season. I think we all agree that if he were to be fired, it would be because there is a change in upper management with Rand Carthon, and that Brian Callahan would be collateral damage. But for the purpose of this exercise, if this head coaching job became opening, what are the pros and cons? What are the things that the Titans can sell to potential candidates, and what are some of the things that could steer those candidates away?
Well, you can't sell stability. I tell you that.
You absolutely cannot.
That you cannot walk into a meeting and say, "Hey, we are the Pittsburgh Steelers. We are the most stable franchise in all of." No, you're not that. You're one of the most unstable franchises within the last at least 5 years. There's not much you can sell other than this, because if you do fire the head coach, I would assume you're going to fire the GM too. But I guess in this exercise, it's just dealing with the head coach. My first selling point would be this: you get to pick your quarterback, be it free agency or through the draft. If you like a guy, we will do what we need to do. We will do what we feel we need to do in order to get the guy you want. So if that means if we end up with the 4th pick, we're going to try to find a way. If you like one of these guys that's in the draft that much, we're going to try to find a way to get up to that spot where you can draft your guy, or via free agency. Whatever guy you earmark, that's the guy we want to go get first and foremost. Because my thing is, if any coach comes in here, if they don't have an established quarterback, they want to be able to get their own. The guy that they're either going to extend their job with or lose their job with, either or. So first and foremost, I would sell that. You get to pick your quarterback. That's where I would start first, Willie.
And looking over Barnwell's article, I think it's interesting to point out, number one, he doesn't think that Callahan and Carthon should lose their job.
I don't think they should either. But
and I don't either. I'm going to continue with this. I just think you're going to create more problems and get a new set of problems if you move out the current situation you've got. And continuity is a huge thing. You're changing the offense, changing the defense, what kind of players you're looking for. Like, there's something to be said for, okay, you know what you're running on offense and defense. Let's find better personnel to fit what you're trying to run. That being said, here is the thing that caught my attention as far as cons, Adam, from Barnwell. Cap space. I would think with the quarterback that you're not paying, cap space shouldn't be an issue. He points out, though, that you've got some investments here. And this is what the downside was of, quote, spending all that money in free agency. So he lays it out pretty well. Calvin Ridley, he's okay. You know, that's middling result for him, but he's going to be there.
But I think a lot of his problem was the quarterback.
Well, yeah, but he might be the best. Like, he might have the fewest question marks, right? But what's his upside? I don't think he's a star wide receiver. He's a good wide receiver that you're paying pretty decent amount of money for. You've got Snead. Where's his career going with the investment you've got? Cushenberry with the Achilles. What does that do to his season next year?
Yeah, he's going to be. I can tell
There's
you right
another
now.
guy that you're paying, right? Chido Awuzie. Where's his career going? I don't know what you've got on him. But this is the thing about the shiny new toys that you bring in free agency. The first year is what it is, and they didn't really move the needle this year. And they're only going to get a year older. You get them as older players. Their careers are already aging. So how do those contracts age? How easy is it to get out of those contracts? These are the kind of things that are he lists it as a con.
So
Adam.
we have some breaking news.
Oh, okay.
So Teddy Bridgewater is coming out of retirement and expected to sign with the Lions. Source told the insiders. This is from Ian Rappaport.
Oh, this is big.
Okay.
I thought you were saying Teddy Bridgewater is coming out of retirement. He's coming on to quarterback the Titans on Sunday.
That would have been big too. I mean, I guess he's coming out of retirement. Titans.
But getting back to the point, though, Adam, it should be a pro is the cap space. Barnwell lists it as a con. That's not a good thing to me.
After they spend so much money in free agency,
like
and
Kenneth
the players
Murray's
they
another
brought
one.
in,
These are all things like Tony Pollard. He's been okay. He's going to be a year older next year. What do you get from Tony Pollard next year? These are the things that can hamper a roster that needs an infusion of talent and life. And so I look at it next year and I'll say next year is going to be a tough year. I think. So I would ride it out, try to make modest improvements, draft well, develop. And I think you're shooting for 2-3 years down the road, realistically.
Well, I think
another thing that he mentions, Barnwell mentions in the story as a pro, is the fact that the Titans play in a winnable division. We were talking about the Houston Texans in the opening segment. They're struggling. And although they have their quarterback in CJ Stroud, there are question marks throughout the division. There is not that clear dominant team in the AFC South as there is in the AFC West, for example, with the Kansas City Chiefs. So that is another potential selling point if it were to come to that with some of these modest improvements, as Willie has suggested, that the division is still in play. You do not have to be 13-4 or 14-3 to win this division. You could probably win this division at 10-7, 11-6. Now that's a huge jump from where the Titans are right now. But if you make those improvements over time, it is not a division with that clear-cut number one team.
But the more you look at this stuff, because I agree with everything that's in there, I look at more of, could any coach take this roster next year? Would any coach look at this roster and say, I can win with that roster? It's the roster that is flawed much more than the coaches, I think. And that's where I think this offseason is huge for
and that's why I said they got to go get a quarterback. Can you win with this roster? Yeah, you can win with this roster.
You think so? I don't think you can.
No.
Obviously the quarterback's a huge.
You can win with this roster because they've already told you. They've already shown you if they had
win what? How more than they've won this year? Yeah, but win
Yeah,
to the playoffs?
hear me out on this. They've already showed you that they can be in games with below average quarterback play. They've
Competent
lost their
quarterback play.
competent, with competent quarterback play. They could have won, let's just say, at least 4 more games. They could have won at least 4 more games with competent quarterback play.
Right.
That's
How
why
many games did Will Levis single-handedly cost
3?
the Titans early in this season?
3 hit by himself.
Yeah, arguably
Like,
at least 3.
like
Yeah.
3, like he was legitimately the reason directly the reason why they lost. So you factor in 3 games. And that's why I said my selling point to the next guy, if indeed that happens, is listen, we have a roster we feel that can compete in our division. I'm not talking about the rest of the division or in the AFC. I'm talking about our division. We have a roster that we believe it can compete in our division. We're going to give you an opportunity to go get your quarterback, and then we're going to build on this roster that we have. Because when you went out this offseason and got those free agents, that was supposed to be the bridge that keep you afloat for the next 2 to 3 years until you move to that stadium. And then you hope that via the draft, you would draft young players that would develop as you're walking to that stadium. They would develop into players. And now you add some of those older players with those younger players. Now you got a team that can compete for a Super Bowl as you're going into that new stadium. That's what I would be selling to a potential head coach that's coming in. Listen, this was a 2 to 3 year plan. Yes, it didn't work out the first year. Our veteran guys that we brought in, free agency, they got hurt. We're hoping that the next following year, it'd be a lot better. We get you a quarterback, whatever quarterback that is you want to get to help us bridge that gap. And then we will continue to build a team underneath that. It's hard to build this team without a quarterback. It's hard to really build any team in the NFL without a quarterback. You have to be able, just like Washington. Washington, they did all that stuff around the quarterback, but nothing was happening. They still were horrible. And then what happens? They go out and they trade away all those guys that they went and they got them a quarterback. And what happened? They became a better team, not because they added all these people to the mix. They traded away half of them, but they got that one guy that every team needs.
Is there any possibility that can happen with
I don't know.
year's Titans? So I don't know.
I don't
it doesn't
know.
look good.
But that would be a selling point for me. That would be a selling point. Like, you get an opportunity to pick the guy you want, whoever that guy is, at least to bridge that gap from now until we move into that stadium.
615-737-1025. If you were the Titans and you happen to have a head coaching opening, what are the major selling points? What would you try to use to attract a coaching candidate to Tennessee? 615-737-1025. We'll continue the conversation on the other side. Tune into 102.5, 106.3 The Game for the TransPerfect Music City Bowl this coming Monday, December 30th. Chase and Big Joe will have pregame coverage starting at noon, and kickoff is set for 1:30. Music City Bowl coverage is presented by Hi-Fi Buy. This week's Nashville Best Deal is from the Academy in Goodlettsville. More than just a training space, here every class is a journey into the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu taught by their dedicated instructors. They have a state-of-the-art facility that offers everything from muscle recovery services to top-tier training equipment. Go to thegamenashville.com/deals and get a $150 month of unlimited classes for just $75. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, talking Bill Barnwell's article on ESPN.com, ranking the potential NFL job openings by how desirable they are. By the way, number one on the list, according to Barnwell, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The pros: quarterback, weak division, generally in parentheses, patient ownership, location, high draft pick, and regression to the mean coming. Cons: culture rot. That does not sound good. You do not want culture rot. Anything that's rotting is bad, but culture rot, that sounds incredibly bad. Along with significant spending over the previous 3 seasons and the general manager. But to a point that Derek Mason made before the break about something that is not a selling point for the Titans position is stability. And Barnwell points out that if ownership goes after a new coach, it would be the 4th consecutive season in which the Titans fired either the head coach or the general manager. That is not something that might be appealing to a potential head coach if that job were to become available.
No, it won't. Coaches go in, hoping and believing that they will have an opportunity to fix whatever that is broken. They will get an opportunity to upgrade the roster if it needs upgrading, especially in a situation like the Tennessee Titans. They don't go in thinking, I'm going to be one and done, because you take the job and you hope the understanding is you give me an opportunity to change this roster around. I'm sure that's what Brian Callahan thought when he took the job. I'm sure that's what Rand Carthon believed when he took the job, that you will give me an opportunity to turn this franchise around. And if you've went through either head coach and or GM, 4 of them over the last, so many years, then why would a coach want to come here? Because the minute that he's not doing well, you're going to fire him or the GM or both of them. So that wouldn't be that's not a good selling point, because you haven't had any stability. They need to start, first and foremost winning. But in the midst of winning, you have to establish some type of stability in the front office, because if there's no stability in the front office, there's no winning. So whether you change this year or a year or two now, you got to understand that, the changes that you're consistently making is affecting your franchise. And I'm not just talking about that particular year. I'm talking about years after that.
I think Jacksonville is one that just historically, as I think about Jacksonville, should come together more often than it does. It's like they keep missing their windows, right? It seems like, okay, it's lined up now. They've had the first pick. They've had a top 5 pick the last 2 or 3 years. I throw my hands up, because I think you and I were both in the boat last year, D-Mace, going into the season last year. I thought they were gonna be the team.
Yeah,
they were on the verge of a window opening and being really good. I don't know all of the ins and outs of their roster beyond the skill guys, but they should be better. I don't know what happened.
But that would be to one of the pros for taking this job. That would be a reason why. Okay, I gave you the con of not being a stable franchise in the Titans, but the pros is, like he said, this division is a weak division. We saw Houston get out last year, but Houston's struggling this year. Well, you can say some of the struggling has to do with the influx of injuries they've had on the offensive side of the ball. But yet and still, this division has had no stability as far as, 1 or 2 teams being those teams like they've had in prior years. This year, and it seems like the last couple of years, there's been this jockeying of positioning or who's going to win AFC South. And that should be a good selling point. Like, listen, this is not an established, division. This is not, the AFC West where you got Denver, Kansas City, and the Chargers all vying, for playoff spots. You're in a division where it's weak. And if you get some good quarterback play and we, get this roster where we need to get it, then you have an opportunity to win this division in a year. You have an opportunity to win this division in a year. That's how much change you can make. So that would be my selling point, as opposed to what I said about the stability, because that is a con. Jacksonville's going to run into the same thing. If they change coaches again, it's going to be like, is there any stability? They probably need to change coaches. But that instability can cause what Barnwell says Jacksonville has, the culture rot. You keep on changing individuals at the head coaching position and or the GM, you're going to develop culture rot.
Yeah.
That sounds bad. You don't want to develop culture rot.
That sounds like a bad thing. I agree.
You don't want that.
If you go to your doctor and they say, hey, you've got some culture rot, that's not a good thing.
Oh, no.
You're not leaving the doctor's office feeling better about yourself if you've got culture rot.
No.
You're not going to call your wife and say, honey, I've got culture rot. What are we going to do? Like,
let's go have dinner. Nah, you ain't
Sounds
doing
ominous.
that. Yes.
It's not good. But one thing that Barnwell points out, and to Derek's point about if we can turn around this roster quickly, you have a chance to win a winnable division. As Barnwell writes, the core of most great teams is the players they select in the first 3 rounds of the draft. Owing to mistakes from John Robinson, who was fired in December 2022, and disappointing picks by Ran Carthon, those core guys consist of 2 defensive linemen, 2018 second-rounder Harold Landry and 2019 first-rounder Jeffrey Simmons, both of whom are on second contracts. Now, Barnwell then goes through the draft picks, the misses, all of those things. But to his point, the Titans have been unable to find over these past several years those potential core players in the first 3 rounds of the draft. You hope J.C. Latham becomes that player. Clearly, Will Levis is not going to become that player. You hope T'Vondre Sweat is part of that as well. But as we have gone over many, many times, the inability to draft those game-changing players in those first 3 rounds over these past several years, Ran Carthon and John Robinson, it's put this team in a precarious spot.
Yeah, it has. And, and I understand what Barnwell is saying, that a franchise like this, you need some home runs. You need some first day one home runs. And the Titans haven't had that. They've had guys that have been graduals and still getting better, but nowhere near where they need to be. I'm talking about J.C. Latham. I'm talking about T'Vondre Sweat, guys like that is showing improvement. But in order to, fast track this thing, they needed to be like all pro players this year, which it's not going to happen. 9 times out of 10, if you're drafted within that first 15 picks, you're not going to be an all pro. You might end up being a damn good player that year, but you're still not a quote unquote all pro. It's the years after that. Are you developing into that guy? Do we see those traits? I think you see traits in JC and T'Vondre of really good to potential Pro Bowl / possibly, all pro-ish at times. I think they're trending sort of that way, but they're nowhere near it now, and you need them to be closer to it now than where they are. But it's no slight on them.
Well, this is what we've been assessing since Ran Carthon took over. We've tried to assess what he inherited and what has happened since he got there. And when we sort of did our assessment at the beginning of training camp, I think they're further away from winning based on everything that's happened since then. And it's still not all his fault. That's why what you're talking about with Latham and Skoronski and Sweat, they're desperate for those guys to take next steps.
Yeah.
But how many people from the roster have taken big steps forward this year? Very, very few. Like, for example, any hope of the Treylon Burks.
Yeah,
we had reasonable expectations for him. So now that becomes one of the worst trades of the decade. Now, right? The Robinson trade.
0 Willie Donick dynamic plays from Traylon Burks
Right.
this season.
So-
I think
you've
Roger
gone from,
McCrary
hey,
has taken a step back.
He's taken a step back, no
Yeah.
question. Like that was one of the few little cogs he had. Where's his career going? I don't know. We went through all the free agents, so I think realistically you're further from where you want to go. So
6-1.
I don't
oh,
think
sorry, Willie, go ahead.
it's attractive.
615-737-1025. That last thing, I heard a lot of that when I was in high school. 615-737-1025. Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet's NHL insider, co-host of the 32 Thoughts podcast, author of the 32 Thoughts column, will join us coming up next. We'll get into the NHL and the Nashville Predators with Elliot Freeman, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Bingen, 1025, 1063 The Game.
All right, let's tell you about Lead Company, 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com. You've got some odds and ends going on maintenance-wise at home or at work, and you're thinking, when we get back going here in the routine after the holidays, I need to address this. Well, look no further. General maintenance at home or on your business site, Lead Company can help you with that. 615-567-1000, or you can make the online appointment at leadcompany.com. Just go to the website right now and set it up. And whatever that problem is, they can take care of you. And then never forget, if you got your heating issues going on at this time of the year, that phone number is right there for you, handy. They'll come out and they'll get it fixed for you. That happens at this time of the year. No doubt about it. They're ready for you. Lead Company, proud sponsor, Nashville Predators, in business since 1944. 615-567-1000 or leadcompany.com.
D-Mace, Fingan, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, broadcasting from the Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios, home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you, joined on our phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com, by the self-proclaimed #1 hockey interview on our station every week, Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet's NHL insider, co-host of the 32 Thoughts, the podcast, and author of the 32 Thoughts column. Elliot, I hope you and your family have had a wonderful holiday season. We did see a coaching change about an hour ago in the NHL, the Detroit Red Wings firing Derek Lalonde and replacing him with Todd McClellan. But the NHL roster freeze is soon to be lifted. A lot of activity before that went into effect. Are you expecting a lot of activity to pick up once it is lifted? Which teams are you expecting to be busy? And could the Predators be one of them?
I think, first of all, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all the great hockey fans of Nashville and surrounding areas. The one thing it's pretty clear is that teams believe there is room to maneuver this year. And there is, I think, there's definitely a sense, Adam, that there's always stress, but I don't know if the stress is higher this year or it's just forcing people into moving sooner. So I do think there is the potential for some activity. Right before you mentioned the coaching change, that was in Detroit. Right before the break, Detroit and Buffalo were discussing something. So I kind of look to see, okay, did that run out of time, or is that a situation where we could see, that kind of pick itself up again? I think Vancouver was kind of looking around. I always wonder with them, they like to strike early, and I think that there is always a desire there to improve as quick as they can. And yes, I still do keep an eye on the Predators. And, one of the reasons is if Buffalo is a team that is looking to deal, I think there are some matches there. And I also just think in general, because Barry Trotz has indicated that he is trying to do some things, I'm watching him as well.
I'm curious, Elliot, about the Predators and centers, because that's one thing we've talked about at length, something that the Predators need. Over the past few weeks, we've seen Steven Stamkos shift to center. First, he had to because of an injury to Ryan O'Reilly. But he, Philip Forsberg, and Jonathan Marchessault have been excellent as a line over the past couple of weeks. It fits nicely with Stamkos as the first line center, Ryan O'Reilly as the second line center. I'm curious if Stamkos's emergence, for lack of a better term, as a viable 1C for this team changes the calculus for Barry Trotz as he searches the trade market.
I think it's a great question. Right now, it's probably slowed things down a little bit. I just think in the long term, my biggest question would be, first of all, I can imagine how this is exciting to Stamkos, because one of the things that Tampa had kind of decided was that he was not a long-term answer at that position. So I'm sure getting a chance to show that he can do it, even if it's just a little burst, is probably very meaningful for him. So I would probably think that that's a big motivator for Stamkos. The wildest thing for me to see about it, Adam, is just the 3 right-hand shots, right? You just never see this. And it's just fascinating for me to watch it because it's just such a unique dynamic. I would think in general, though, while it probably fills the gap, I mean, Stamkos is a little older. O'Reilly is a little older. If Novak is not going to reach up and grab that spot, then I'm sure that Barry Trotz is looking at it, whether as more of a long-term play or I bet you it hasn't taken it off of Trotz's radar. He probably looks at this as, this is good. I'll go with this if we need to and if it works for us. But long-term, you're probably still looking at it and saying, if there's someone you can acquire, Trotz has talked with you guys about how he wants to get younger and faster, that, Stamkos 1, O'Reilly 2 he's probably still looking at it and saying, I could still do that if the opportunity presented itself.
So, Elliot, you're saying that do you believe this team will do enough moving forward? Because they won 3 out of the last 4 games, but they've gotten points in all 4 of those games, and Marchessault has led the way in regards to how well they've been playing, at least for the last 4 or 5 games. But do you think they can do enough as the season, the second half of the season, that he doesn't feel he needs to make any big moves?
Derek, it's just Christmas time, so I would love to lie to you and say everything is good. But you don't pay me to come on this show to lie. Mm-hmm. So I will not do that. Look, I think this year it would take one of the most incredible runs we've ever seen for them to make the playoffs this year. Because the issue is not just how many points they're out of a playoff spot, but how many teams are between them and a playoff spot. And in this league with the loser point, it is so hard to catch up the deeper you get into the schedule, because teams can often get the 1 point if they get a game into overtime in the shootout. I think the best thing I've seen out of Nashville the last few games is that Marchessault is finally going. And maybe it was as simple as an adjustment period. Maybe it was as simple as that heart-to-heart he and Trotz had after the game in Montreal, where there was the miscommunication about starting the guys from the Montreal area. But whatever the case is, Marchessault is going like he can. He is a really, really talented guy, and he is a difference maker. And maybe that's probably that's the best sign you've had, or I would say that's the best sign you've had lately. Derek, I think he's taking a long-term view, Trotz. And I think he's saying that, okay, maybe they make a run this year, maybe they surprise me, but nothing short-term really makes sense. I think that he's looking at a big picture, resetting the team for next year, and hoping that this year was a blip for some of these guys, and with a year in Tennessee under their belts, everything will be different next season. I would probably make that bet, unless some of those guys wanted to leave for whatever reason. I would make that bet if I was him.
Elliot Friedman is with us, and Elliot, it's an interesting observation, because I think that's probably what Barry Trotz has to be weighing right now. Is if you watch the last homestand in particular, but even wind it back to the last 6, they're 4-1-1. They've played really good teams in there. A win at Dallas. They've LA was playing great hockey coming in. They beat Carolina, who's always tough.
That game, like that LA game,
was huge.
I bet like a month ago, they probably blow that game.
Yes, and they should have beaten Pittsburgh if it weren't for an unreal performance by Sidney Crosby, who just made some great plays. They pretty much outplayed Pittsburgh, who's been playing great hockey. And even the game that they lost in regulation in Colorado, a couple of just awful moments at the wrong time. But for the guts of the game, it's looking more like it was supposed to look, I guess, for lack of a better term. But that has to be tough, weighing a slice of 6 or 8 games where they're starting to see some things, but also looking at the reality of this year. That's a tough place to be, because I could sit here and tell you, as you're saying, you've got to leap all these teams, but I look at the roster of the teams. I think the Predators are better than a lot of the teams that are ahead of them if they get their act together. You have to ask yourself, can they rip off 8-9 straight games at some point here? I think that they can, but how does that change your long view? That's the job of a GM, and that's a tough job.
I don't think it's that tough. Like, Willie, you are the ghost of Christmas optimism. I really like that. I think that's very important.
Well, I just say they cannot be as bad as they were. They every single thing that could have went wrong did go wrong. And it's coming around. They still haven't hit anywhere close to where I think that they can be. But maybe I am the ghost of Christmas optimism here. And that's what I'm trying to guard against. That's what I'm trying to guard against. That's why I'm asking your perspective here. That's why I'm turning to you for therapy here in this.
Well, I think Trotz's job is, as he said, I think, look, you're 11 points out of the playoffs. The team that's in the last playoff spot has 2 games in hand on you. and there's 5 teams in between you guys and Dallas, right? Like it's an astronomical challenge. Is it impossible? No. But is it statistically highly unlikely? By NHL standards, yes. However, I think that I would bet that a lot of the guys on this Predators team are embarrassed by the way this year has gone. And they have simply said, and I bet you there's a lot of those guys in there saying, no matter what happens, we are not ending this season the way we started it. And I would bet that, especially with a guy like Yossi, he's your captain. And I guarantee to you that's the message that he is sending, that we are not ending this the way we started it. And I guarantee there's a lot of pros there, and I would bet that they would fall in line behind that. I think that the other things that you guys have to, but I think Trotz's position is unchanged from what he's told you guys, and I've heard his interviews with Jared before, and that is that he has to look and say, what happened with our roster at the beginning of the season, and how do I fix that? I think the Predators look slow, so he's going to try to deal with that. They have that big hole. Everybody knows. Everybody sees it down the middle. Very, very hard thing to fix. How do I fix that? I think what Trotz looks at it is, I want to see, and again, this is something he said on your station, when things are going badly, who jumps overboard and who grabs an oar and tries to row like hell. That's what he's looking at right now. Who, when things were badly, tried to make things better. Those are the guys we need to keep. Okay? I think that that's one thing. I think the other thing is, so I think that's what he's looking at is who really cares and how do I fix what ailed us? And I think one of the things he's going to try to fix is down the middle, although again, it's hard. And the other thing he's going to try to fix is the speed. Like I look at it like Saros was good for you guys. Like you guys had a really weird season. Saros was good. For a while, he had the best penalty kill in the league. I mean, things like that aren't normally associated with losing teams. So I could see him looking at the underlying trends and saying, it wasn't that bad. But what's Bill Parcells' old line? You are what your record says you are. And their record said they weren't very good. So how do you fix those weaknesses?
Okay, so let's go back to Buffalo, because that's a really interesting. I can see two GMs on a phone call needing therapy. Man, it hasn't gone well for us. No, it hasn't gone well for us either. Let's talk. And Dylan Cousins is that centerpiece part that you've been throwing his name out there. A lot of people have as well. He is a center. So what do you think is going on around the league when you hear a name like that? Because he's an intriguing guy, because he hasn't played on a winning team, right? He's had 1 or 2 years where, man, the stats look great. Other years where it doesn't. So how is the market shaping up as this name gets floated out there now for the last couple of weeks?
I think it's just like I think there's a lot of interest in him. Ever since his name kind of got out there, Willie, I think there's a ton of interest in him. And I think the biggest challenge is I think Buffalo is looking at this as, look at all the players we've lost who've won somewhere else. And I think they're careful because of that, gun-shy, for lack of a better term. And that's why I look at this and I say, yeah, there's a possibility something happens, but Buffalo's going to make you pay. And so I think the Sabres have to figure out why things have gone the way they have. And I think they're going to have to make changes. But it's a tough place to be when you know you have to make changes, and then you've seen a bunch of guys you moved on from go. Like Eichel's one of the best players in the league now. Reinhart is also one of the best players in the league now. Like when that happens to you, like the worst thing that you could see happen is, let's just say Dylan Cousins got traded to Nashville. What if he goes out and becomes one of the best players in the league? Good for you guys. Awful for them. And I think it can be very hard to deal in those situations and circumstances.
No doubt about it. Another one that I think you've been commenting on a little bit with your podcast is it's interesting to assess what the World Juniors going on. We're watching a couple of prospects as we speak. One of them is Edstrom, who was one of the pieces that the Predators got in the Yaroslav Askarov trade. So I don't know if you're hearing much of how San Jose is liking what they're seeing. I'm just looking at the stats for Askarov. He is, like he has the last couple of years, been pretty dominant at the AHL level. He's played a few games in the NHL, which it's always one of those what if he had just bided his time, he could be in theory backing up Saros now. What would that look like? I have no idea, but it's crazy how in a few months you look back on it. But what are the returns you're seeing on how Askarov is acclimating to life in San Jose?
Well, the first thing I'd say is I think that is a futile experiment for Predators fans. I don't think that Predators fans should waste their time thinking about that because it just wouldn't have worked. He wanted to play. He was at a point in his career where he wanted to be in the NHL or close to it. And once you guys signed Saros and it was the right move, he was gone. It's just a matter of when. He was gone. He played a game in Edmonton on Saturday afternoon where it was a shooting gallery. The Oilers were all over them. I think they outshot them something like 39-20. And they got to within about half minute of winning that game in regulation. The Sharks did. It was 2-1. He was incredible. And Edmonton scored. And then once Draisaitl and McDavid come on the ice for the start of overtime, you might as well just not even play. You might as well just go back to the dressing room.
Seen that movie before.
Yeah. Scored, I think, 18 seconds in. And so, they lost, but he got them a point. Like, you can see the talent. He's real world and he's all world. But look, I think fans, if they want, fans are fans. They can, I'm not going to tell anybody how to feel. Maybe you can be frustrated with the Predators because he got traded. But the fact is that once Saros was signed, Askarov was a goner. That was just the way it was going to be. So I always look at it in the moment. What was the right move? Keep Saros or keep Askarov? And the right move was obviously keep Saros. So, I can understand why fans get disappointed or get frustrated, but in the real world, that wasn't going to last any longer than it did.
Elliot Freeman joining us on D-Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Elliot, last one for you. Willie mentioned the World Junior Championships. They are underway today. Canada plays later, as I obviously know But the projected top defense pair for Team Canada is an all-Predators pair, Tanner Molendyk and Andrew Gibson. From people around Team Canada, people you talk to, what are people saying about Molendyk and Gibson as this tournament gets underway?
Well, both those guys will be NHL players. I have to tell you, I don't for me, Adam, it's so much watching the NHL. If I had to watch juniors too, my head would explode. Now I'll watch this.
I feel like that trying to follow the NBA sometimes. There's only so many hours in the day, right?
Exactly. I mean, well, the thing about the NBA and the NFL is I can just watch that stuff for fun. I don't have to think when I watch that. So I enjoy it. But the NHL, I'm always thinking what does this mean? So, so I don't get a chance to watch them play in their juniors too much. I know people think highly of both those kids. I think they think they're both going to be NHL players. I think Molendyk probably would be considered to have a more upside than Gibson. But I know people who speak really highly of Molendyk. I'll tell you this though, and again, I am not the expert on this. I have never heard more complaining in Canada about the snubs on Canada's roster as I did this year. So one of the ways I'm watching this tournament, first of all, I want to see Canada do well because I'm a proud Canadian, but I'm actually really curious to see it because I want to see if there's any validity to all these people who say Canada left off about 3 or 4 great players and great young players. Now, the guy on Canada, I think you guys should all be kind of looking at. There's a couple, because especially if you guys have a top pick, there's a defenseman there. His last name is Schaefer. And he is he's the top D in this draft. And I had several people tell me that as this tournament goes, the more of a role he's going to have. Now, I don't know if that's the kind of guy who will be on your radar, and they might not trust him in the big defensive situations because this is a tournament for 19-year-olds. He's not 19. But if you're looking for D on Canada, that's the one people are really excited about because he's a draft eligible. Like there's two other kids, Martone, Porter Martone is a Canadian kid. James Higgins is an American kid. Those are three of the four. Our draft gurus tell us that those are three of the four top picks this year. The fourth one is a Canadian named Michael Misa. He was one of the guys who didn't make the team and people are up in arms about. So if your Predators fans are watching to see who could be available at the top of the draft this year, Schaefer, Canada, Martone, Canada, Higgins, USA, those are the three big ones to watch.
Elliot Freeman, Sportsnet's NHL insider, co-host of the 32 Thoughts podcast, author of the 32 Thoughts column, joining us as he does every Thursday on D. Mace, Vingan, and Donick. Elliot, always a pleasure to speak to you, my friend. We'll talk next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you as well, Elliot. 615-737-1025. Let's get into the Predators. The Predators entered the holiday break winning 4 of 6. Let's break it down. Coming up next, Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 1025-1063, the game.
Happy Thursday, everyone. Had to remember what day it was. I had to ask Willie and David. Goodness, I forgot these days running so close together with the holidays. But yes, happy Thursday to everyone. I hope you had a wonderful and safe Christmas. But I need to talk about Zen Sports. And they just picked the November big game winner. They picked it already for the pros. So if you didn't win, I'm sorry. But you know what? It was so great in the month of November that they're running it back in the month of December with the big game college edition, people. This time, instead of going to the big game for the pros, they're giving you a chance to go to the very first big game in the new college football tournament with a grand prize of $10,000 cash and 2 tickets to the biggest college football game of 2025. Yes, the one south of us in the great city of Atlanta, and the ability to earn entries on every bet you place in December. It doesn't get much better than this. If you don't win the grand prize, don't worry about it. You'll also have a shot to win one of 10 small prizes, which includes $1,000 toward any college football game in 2025. So what are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules and earn a $100 no danger wager on your first bet. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. Gambling problems, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
Tomorrow, it's your chance to participate in Preds Pick the Click. If you correctly guess a Preds player that scores a goal in the Preds game tomorrow night, you win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Preds home game. Participate with Robbie and Rexroad tomorrow morning at 8:45. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan here with you. The Predators resume their schedule tomorrow at St. Louis. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 102.5, 106.3 The Game as they start a 6-game road trip tomorrow in St. Louis. But the Predators, perhaps they didn't want a holiday break because they were rolling as the NHL paused its schedule. They have won 4 of 6. They have points in 5 of those 6 games, so they have a 4-1-1 record. They're scoring more than 3 goals per game across those 6 games. Jonathan Marchessault has 11 points in his past 7 games. Steven Stamkos has 7 points in his past 7 games. As we talked about with Elliot Freeman, that first line of Philip Forsberg, Steven Stamkos, and Jonathan Marchessault has been excellent. They have outscored opponents 8-2 at 5-on-5 since joining up. I believe, Willie, correct me if I'm wrong here, the first full game with that line was the loss to Calgary about 2 weeks ago.
Right.
So it's been 7 games with that line, although they have won 4 of their past 6. But that line has outscored opponents 8-2 at 5-on-5 since joining up a couple of weeks ago. So Elliott said that it would take one of the most statistically improbable runs for the Predators to make the playoffs. And during the break, I did some very quick math, and I want to emphasize this. Take this with a grain of salt because I was so bad at math when I was a student that I had to repeat 11th grade math my freshman year in college. So just make sure that you remember all of that as I do this very quick math. So the Predators have 29 points in the standings currently after their 4-1-1 run. Last season, it took 98 points to make the playoffs in the Western Conference. Vegas had 98 points. They were the second wild card team in the Western Conference. There are 94 possible points remaining on the Predator schedule because they have 47 games. So to make it to 98, they would need 69 of 94 points to reach 98 on the season. That is a points percentage of like 730 something. The best team in the league right now in terms of points percentage is Vegas. They are at 721. So that would mean the Predators would have to play even better than the best team in the league right now in points percentage over the course of the remainder of the season to make the playoffs. So, as Elliot said, is it impossible? No. Is it highly improbable? Yes. But, Willie, the signs are there that this Predators team has finally found the identity that was eluding them over the first 2 months of the season.
I don't know if they can play at that clip. But I also don't think that it necessarily will take 98 points to get in. I think the way it's shaping up, that last – this is just my assessment as I look at the standings. Well, I mean, I guess what you're looking at who could be a team that could bump out of that wild card. That's, I think, the biggest problem of your March to get to that second wild card is you'd have to something's got to go pretty wrong for a team that's in the wild card spot. So I look at that more than I do what does it take to get to 98. What you have to hope is that it flattens out, but I don't know. Are you going to knock Vancouver out? Are you going to knock Dallas out? Is there somebody in the top 3 right now that could have it go wrong? You're hard pressed to see that that's the case.
But it's not even 98 points. I think even reaching 90 points is going to be
very, very tough. Oh, yeah.
So that's why I'm looking at this, and that's why I said to Elliot, because I don't look at it from the standpoint of the playoffs now. This is not even about the playoffs anymore. If they go on an improbable run, it would be a great story to tell in 10 years. But as they sit right now, the probability of them making it even at 90 points is very slim.
Well,
so
and I think these websites will tell you what it's 5%, 6%, even with the uptick.
Exactly. So my thing is, what can they do can they do enough not to get in the playoff, but can they do enough to show Barry, like they did last year, that, okay, we are still headed down the right direction with this team. We don't need to make any major moves. Yes, you probably got to go out and get a center, but a legit center. But we don't need to make all of these big moves again or make drastic moves to get rid of guys. If we show as we continue to go that, okay, first half of the season, it took us a minute to gel. But somehow, some way, we managed to gel as a team. We started to play better. That's all I want to see.
Yeah, I think that's remember, Adam, I was thinking about this because at the beginning of the month, I think it was, or right around Thanksgiving time, Barry Trotz said, I would like to reassess at Christmas. And that's what every team is doing that right now, right? Every team is doing that. And then the next assessment will probably be when the league breaks for the Four Nations tournament in February, where everybody's
going to have a month and a half.
So I think this will tell us a lot this next road trip. They haven't been able to win on the road, and they're playing Winnipeg twice, a juggernaut, twice at Winnipeg during this stretch. They also play at Minnesota on New Year's Eve. They play at Vancouver.
So they got some tough games coming up.
So this
4 of the 6 teams they're playing, including Winnipeg twice, as Willie mentioned, 4 of the 6 teams they're playing on this road trip are in playoff position. One of the teams that's not, Calgary, is right below the cut line.
And Calgary, I would have to say, has overachieved, but they've been a dominant team at home, 12-4-3 in that building. So you're looking at this road trip, and you're looking at a team that's won 3 games on the road, and you're like, okay, if you're Barry Trotz, show me. You surprise people and you rip off a bunch of wins on this road trip, then maybe I got to say, let's play it out. But I think the right approach is what he has basically done. He's looking for ways that might make his team better or might not in the short term, but will make his team better or create more flexibility for next year in a bounce back. Because I think the probability of them making the playoffs, Adam, you probably could find Puckpedia or what it has a daily thing. Puckpedia,
I think that sounds right.
5%, whatever it is. They've got
Money Puck. Money Puck is a popular one.
Yeah.
So another well-known website on this show. By the way, I looked it up. SportLogic, which is something that Willie and I use a lot. They have the Predators' probability of making the playoffs after this 4-1-1 stretch at 1.4%. So even after going 4-1-1,
guy like you and a girl like me ending up together.
Well, Lloyd, that's difficult to say, and we really don't.
Hit me with it. Just give it to me straight. I came a long way just to see you married. Just least you can do is level with me. What are my chances?
Not good.
Basically, chances aren't good.
You mean not good like 1 out of 100?
I'd say more like 1 out of 1,000,000.
So you're telling me there's a chance?
That was me asking Elliot. That was me asking
Yes.
Elliot just a few minutes ago about the Predators' chances of making the playoffs. But to get to the point, Adam, is if you were to ask Money Puck, what are the chances that they will play a lot better and fall short of the playoffs? But at the end of the year, you're like, okay, that looks like the team that you were supposed to have in those first 30 games. We'll have to assess that in the offseason, why that happened, because there's so many games. You mentioned one against Calgary where Roman Josi got hurt. They had a lead in the game. They end up losing. There's so many puzzling losses. And why? How? It just hasn't been their year. But I think you're starting to see a roster that is taking shape. So if I can make moves that create flexibility and ways to address the needs of the roster in the offseason next year, I think that's probably the approach.
I would agree with that. And the Alex Carrier for Justin Barron trade is the perfect example of that. They got younger, they got cheaper. You hope that Justin Barron is a player that can grow with the Predators, considering their track record with developing defensemen. But when you're talking about what the Predators could do over the course of the rest of the season, it's reminiscent of the last time the Predators missed the playoffs. It was a different scenario. They had a ton of injuries to major players, and Barry Trotz will tell you they were fielding basically a minor league team near the end of that season. They made it to, I believe, game 80 or 81 before being eliminated from playoff contention. But Barry Trotz saw something in that team. He realized then that the culture was good because despite all of the injuries, young players came up, they played well. It influenced him to go out and sign Ryan O'Reilly and Gus Nyquist and Luke Shen. So maybe you're seeing something like that, or you could see something like that this season. If they play well down the stretch, they fall short. But if they have the makings of a team that could rebound next year, Barry Trotz is setting himself up there. I do want to point out one other thing. I think Derek made a point recently that I think was quite on point. And it's weird to say this, but some of the injuries that the Predators suffered over the past few weeks could end up being a blessing in disguise, namely the injury to Ryan O'Reilly, because that injury forced Andrew Brunette to move Steven Stamkos to center, which is something that he really hasn't done, Stamkos that is, in recent years. And we finally see a top line that's clicking. Now, you want Philip Forsberg to actually score. He's racking up assists, but he hasn't scored in 12 or 13 games, if I'm not mistaken. But Stamkos looks reinvigorated. Jonathan Marchessault looks reinvigorated. So looking back on it, those few games that Ryan O'Reilly missed could end up being one of the better things that happened to the Predators this season, as weird as that is to say.
Yeah, I think you hit on that, Derek. Sometimes injuries force you to try something that you maybe wouldn't have done otherwise, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, we might have something here.
Yeah, because
that's the question is this going to sustain itself for the next several weeks, months? Because it's one thing to have a 4-1-1 stretch, but that only scratches the surface of what you really want it to look like. Can you now turn that into weeks of consistency, months of consistency?
Yes, it's hard to make a change when there's no ability to move guys around. And before the O'Reilly injury, there was really no room to sort of move guys around and hope that it worked. He made line changes. We saw that. It seemed like he was making line changes every other game at one point. But when you have an injury like you've had with O'Reilly and obviously Josi, then you're forced, like you said, you're forced to pick guys in situations that you thought about, but you didn't have the ability to move them quite yet. But now you're forced into it, and it seems to be working out. But I mean, the tail sign to me will be once they get healthy again. What does it look like moving forward? Can they incorporate the guys that were injured with the guys that have been playing and been playing very well? How do you incorporate now the original roster back to where it was, even though the guys that you have in place now, they're playing well in the situations that you have them in?
615-737-1025. The Predators are back in action tomorrow night to start a 6-game road trip in St. Louis. Puck drop at 7, pregame at 6, right here on 102.5, 106.3. The Game. Coming up next, a Titans reunion that is over even before it started. We'll wrap up the show next. Willie Donick, Derek Mason, Adam Vingan, 102.5, 106.3. The Game.
Zen Sports just picked the grand prize winner for the November Big Game Sweepstakes, and they are running it back in December with the Big Game Sweepstakes College Edition. This time, instead of going to the big game for the pros, they're giving you a chance to go to the very first big game in the new college football tournament with a grand prize of $10,000 cash and 2 tickets to the biggest college football game of 2025. Yes, the one in Atlanta, and the ability to earn entries on every bet you place in December. It doesn't get much better than this. If you don't win the grand prize, don't worry. You'll also have a shot to win one of 10 small prizes, which grants you $1,000 toward any college football game in 2025. So what are you waiting for? Head to zensports.com/sweepstakes for a full list of rules and earn a $100 no danger wager on your first bet. That's Zen Sports, where betting just got better. And remember, gambling problem, call 1-800-889-9789. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 years or older to bet here in Tennessee.
D-Mays, Fingen, and Donick, 102.5, 106.3 the game. We have a triple header of bowl games coming up next, starting with the game above Sports Bowl, Pittsburgh and Toledo. That coverage starts right after our program. But I hope if you are a Titans fan, you did not get your David Long Jr. jersey out of mothballs. David Long Jr. claimed off waivers by the Titans on Wednesday. He's gone already. He failed his physical today.
Oh, wow.
So David Long Jr. claimed by the Titans yesterday, failed his physical today. So put that jersey back in storage. You won't be needing it.
Well, they needed another linebacker, and he sort of would have fit the bill, considering he has been here, but under a different regime. I get it, but you can't even pass your physical now. That linebacker position, they're gonna have to find somebody else to at least get some depth because they got guys down at that position.
Yeah, they're going to be scouring the waiver wire again.
That inside backer position,
like they just physically don't have that many players who play that. Yeah, who play that position. They're going to have to get creative. I think I was looking forward to seeing Long,
me too,
because there was a lot of drama in his ending of his tenure, and it seemed like friction with Vrabel. He could not stay healthy, and it's ironic that here they want to bring him back, and he's not healthy.
Can't pass
because he hasn't done well even since he left.
Yeah, he's
really
been injured.
Yeah, but he had his moments. Like when he was a Titan and the Titans were good, he was a big part of why they were good.
Yeah. And when he was healthy in Miami, he played good football, but that's the problem he was never really healthy.
He was the poster child of that soft tissue thing that was plaguing Vrabel. Vrabel was getting angry with the players who seemed to come up with the same kind of pulled hamstrings, and it was giving them a rap, right? It was part of what was used against Vrabel when they made the coaching change.
So, I guess they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and try to find inside backers. Because right now,
Kenneth Murray done for the season. Kenneth Murray done for the season with a wrist injury. David Long has had an interesting career. Yeah, David Long has had an interesting career since he left the Titans. He split time between Miami and Detroit this season, but when I saw that name, I wanted to make sure it was the same David Long. David Long is probably a common name, so I was like, is this the David Long or just another David Long? But when I saw it was the David Long, I said, oh, that's interesting. But then I saw today he failed his physical. So no David Long for the Titans. Never mind. The Titans will need more linebacking help, and it will not come from David Long.
No, unfortunately.
Kenneth Murray, to me, too, is getting back to our discussion earlier in the show. That's one of it. They thought maybe a fresh start. Nobody's ever doubted his talent. He's a first-round draft pick, but it hasn't graded out very well. And what else is out there? But these are what have you gotten from all of the money that you spent in the free agency? Pollard's been solid. Ridley's been okay. And then there's a lot of hodgepodge. The Snead move, which was not a free agent move, but it was part of the money spent. Snead, Cushenberry, Murray,
Cheeto.
What do those guys look like a year older, coming off of injury-plagued seasons?
Yeah, well, they got a lot of, I think, decisions to make even this offseason, because I'm sure you have to factor in, how Cushenberry comes back off an Achilles. How does Snead come back off of a thigh injury that caused him to miss a big chunk of the season to end his season ultimately? How do these guys come back next season? Does Pollard have another solid, really good to solid season in him? Can Spears, in the next 2 games show that he can be a player for this team next year? They got a lot of questions they need to answer as the season winds down, heading into this offseason.
That'll do it for us today. An abbreviated program. We'll also have a 2-hour program tomorrow, but a triple header of bowl games coming up next, starting with the game above Sports Bowl, Pittsburgh and Toledo. We will be back at 11 o'clock tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Be love on your people. Have a blessed and wonderful Thursday. Peace.